The opinions expressed on the following audio program are solely those of the host and the guests. Burner Podcast is an independently produced, not-for-profit show and is not associated with the Burning Man organization or its subsidiaries. The views expressed are not representative of the entire Burning Man community and are presented here for entertainment purposes only. In short, calm the fuck down. It's just a podcast.
So it's episode number 24. 290 days until the man burns as of this recording. So the Burner Podcast team is basically trying to spread the word. And I know it's always like, ooh, it's weird. There's a team. Like, yes, there's a team. There is a small team of people that help make this show possible. There's, of course, me, because you hear my voice the whole time. And then there's producer Meg, who you possibly might want to take a shot of whiskey because you heard her mention. Then there's, of course, Tanasi, who is our online editor and runs the Burner Podcast blog, and Navjeet, who is our music editor and helps with lots of tech-related stuff in the background in order to fulfill the stereotype of being engineer Indian guy. But he's also in charge of our SoundCloud and kind of keeps his finger on the pulse of the Burner music world in a manner which I couldn't. And I would love to get a social media editor in here, somebody to kind of take over Twitter and be out there more connecting with people, because I fucking suck at Twitter. I'm just terrible at it. And this thing that we do, it is our gift to the community. Make no mistake, we have no desire to do advertising or make money off of this thing. At some point, we will need to bring in some kinds of sponsorships as our costs grow. So hopefully I can travel places and interview people. We can pay for server space. As of now, it just comes right out of our pockets. But it is our gift to the community. Ultimately, this is the little thing that we do. We have our monthly meetings, we have emails, and we have text messages, and it's the little workload that we put on. And I'll tell you, for example, today I'm pretty sick right now. I feel like the past couple of episodes, I've had some sort of an ailment over and over. Either my voice is gone or I'm sick. But yeah, I have. I'm not gonna lie to you. I have zero desire to be recording this interview right now. I want more than anything to be laying in bed, eating food and ice cream and watching terrible Netflix. And I swear Netflix never has anything good on. I have no idea why we keep paying them. But yeah, and it's funny. What we're trying to do, like I said, we're trying to spread the word. We're trying to get more people to know that this thing is out there. And of course, we don't want to be spammy and we don't want to advertise. And, it's not a for-profit thing. So it feels weird to purchase like advertising space. It's just kind of bizarre. And it's really funny. I every once in a while, I'll run into a friend out and about and conversation about the podcast comes up and they say, oh man, I'm so sorry, I keep meaning to listen to it, I'm such a bad friend. And I'm like, no, you're either a podcast listener or you're not. Like it's not like I produced this $1 million blockbuster film that's in theaters and you know what, I take it back. It's not like you need to spend money on this thing to keep it going. This thing's gonna keep going whether or not we make any money. So it's fine if you're not a podcast listener. If you're listening to this one show and then you're never going to do it again, that's totally okay. Totally understandable. What would help us most is if you just helped us spread the word. Because there is a percentage of the population that are podcast listeners. And then there is a percentage of the population that are burners and burner curious. And we need to find that overlap, which is this very tiny, teeny, tiny niche audience that wants to listen to people talk and just want to sit around and listen to conversations. I sure as fuck know it's not my friends that listen to this show. I mean, because if you spend enough time with me, you've heard all of this. There's nothing original coming out of my mouth. You've heard everything I have to say. You know my opinions. I can't imagine that this is interesting to people that get to talk to me on a day-to-day basis. Which gives me an interesting idea. I feel like every time I have conflicts with my closest friends, this is the place that I could come totally vent to all you people and have some random person in Ireland decide that my friend is being a total bitch and should not have done that thing on Saturday. You know who you are. You know what? No, you don't, because you don't actually listen to this show. So anyway, help us out. Share the links. Get this information out there. We are on iTunes. It's burnerpodcast.com is the website. It's incredibly easy to find. It's on TuneIn Radio. It's on Stitcher Radio. It's on multiple different platforms. It's really easy to listen to the show. SoundCloud, it's on there. SoundCloud.com/burnerpodcast. And it's, super consistent. Burner Podcast everywhere. Just Google Burner Podcast and it'll come up. It's super easy. So just kind of help us get the word out there. And if we have people outside, of our local community, outside of San Diego, outside of California, outside of the West Coast, I know for a fact some guy in Germany just randomly listened to like 8 episodes in a row. Navjeet actually noticed that when he was reviewing some of the analytics. So this happens. That's usually what happens with podcasts. People just don't know it exists. And as soon as they find out, they just go on a rampage, listening to all of it at the same time. Kind of like Netflix. Hey, look at that. I did a little bring around. And if you have any ideas on helping us spreading the word or any suggestions or input, please do go to burnerpodcast.com. There is a contact page over there. We are listening. We are paying attention to all of your complaints and all of your supportive suggestions. Mostly it's been nothing but support, which makes me suspicious. Everybody keeps saying, oh my God, it's so awesome. Oh, you're so wonderful. I mean, yeah, I know I'm pretty fucking wonderful. But I mean, let me hear some complaints. Something must be wrong here. I guess if it's not, God, that's a real insecure way to think about the world. There's also a phone number to call. That's 858-877-3534. Again, that's 858-877-3534. The number is on the About page over at burnerpodcast.com if you want to hear your voice on the radio. And it's interesting. We tried a little experiment asking what your opinion is of what a burner is to just see like if anybody calls. I got a couple of calls from people who did not want to be on the radio, just saying, you're doing awesome and we really like what you're doing, which is great. That was really sweet. And then I got like weird, like one of them was like, it was as if the Google Voice called some number in a Spanish-speaking country or a Spanish-speaking household, and somebody picked up and they're just like, what? And then, I don't know what the point of that was. And then I also got another voicemail from somebody asking me to call them back without giving me a phone number. So I can't call you back, whoever you are. But thank you. Thank you for the support. Thank you for the kind words. We do appreciate the input. We are paying attention. I swear we are. And we want to make this show better for you if possible, if within our means, within our technological means, within our logistical means, we will do whatever we can to make this the centralized conversation in the podcast world. And we're working on new things, on expanding the shows and getting more people under the umbrella and having more writers, because we know you guys like that shit. So let's get to today's guest. Gaia, the San Diego Ombudsman. It's a funny word to say. I feel like I'm almost saying like a Nigerian word. Ombudsman. Gaia, she that helps us not rip each other's heads off. That is a talent. That is what an ombudsman does. If you have a background in the military, you might be familiar with that title. So we get into a little bit of what an ombudsman does in the San Diego community. And Gaia is, of course, a really wonderful, incredible presence. And she's incredibly calm and such a fitting name, by the way. And we do spend a not insignificant amount of time talking about Kidsville, which I do know is a very important. It's an interesting topic to a lot of people, because it's very common when I do mention, like I mentioned, having done this interview and I say, oh yeah, we talked about Kidsville. People's response was like, Burning Man is at Kidsville? Yes. If you've been to the Burn, I assume you know that if you've been to the Burn, but yes, Kidsville, that's a thing. People do take their kids, little tiny kids, tiny creatures, your spawn, take them to the Burn with you. And of course, the Kidsville that we spent a good amount of time talking about was the Utopia Kidsville, but a lot of the same concepts sort of apply. We did talk about Gaia's first burn with the kiddo. We talked about Kidsville here in Utopia, and if you are organizing events in different parts of the country or the world, this might give you some ideas on how to put together your Kidsville. And so, of course, that leads to talking about parenting, being a parent in this crazy burner community of ours, and of course, the neurosciences. And, somehow, as an interviewer, I'm pretty good at finding the segues here. I know it sounds weird to jump from Kidsville to neurosciences and all kinds of way super intellectual shit like that, which I'm barely keeping up with, by the way. But really, really fascinating stuff. Gaia is, of course, a scientist, and she is the wife of Kingsley, who was our guest, if you'll remember, on episode number 20 of this show. Kingsley, who did research for MAPS, which I absolutely incorrectly said, the correct way to say it, the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies. I accidentally kept saying sciences on the last one. Yeah, the budget on this show is not too high, so sometimes you just make the mistake and you say fuck it and release it. So Gaia, of course, being the wife of Kingsley, who was our guest on episode 20, it's almost like a superhero backstory. You get to hear some of the backstory of how Kingsley ended up where he did, which is kind of fun on this show. What I've enjoyed seeing happening is the links that are happening between the different guests. It's almost like the first appearance of Wolverine was in The Incredible Hulk number 181. And then now it's, and now I'm a turtle nerd. And then we do talk some family. We talk Judaism and being a burner. We talk about, I ask a lot of relationship stuff. I do, because at the time that I recorded this interview, I was like knee deep in my longing for love, and I was trying to figure out what I'm doing wrong and what I'm doing right. And Gaia, of course, I love their relationship. I love their energy. I love their chemistry. And I'm like, I wonder, how do I make that happen for me? So that's probably why I was asking a lot of those kind of questions. Afterwards, Gaia did give me some great dating advice. She gave me some homework on how to rewrite my OkCupid account. But I have not gotten around to doing that, Gaia, if you are listening to this episode, because I have, it looks like some sparks are flying with somebody at this moment. So the interest in writing those OkCupid profiles just did not capture my imagination. But, who knows? Not making any announcements yet. Life is beautiful. I'm meeting all kinds of amazing people. My heart is wide open, and, the hell with the dating sites for now. So let's just go ahead and get into it. Guys, our guest today, I go by Mr. Arash, even though nobody calls me Mr. Welcome to Burner Podcast.
On the first part of the journey, I was looking at all the life. There were plants and birds and rocks and things. There was sand and hills and rain. The first thing I met was a fly with the buzz and the sky with no clouds. The heat was hot and the ground was dry, but the air was full of sound. I've been through the desert on a horse with no name. It felt good to be out of the rain. In the desert, you can't remember your name, 'cause there ain't no one for to give you no name.
And then we made conversation.
Yeah, well, this is...
But it's okay. This time we actually have a very specific start recording moment.
Goodness.
My voice is still kind of gone. Do you hear it? It's kind of hoarse from the
A little
Utopia.
bit, yeah. But it was so much fun.
It was. It was amazing. And I don't really know what happened that I lost my voice, because I don't remember yelling any more than normal. And I also quit smoking, so it's not that.
Well, my voice on Monday was a little bit funny. I mean, when I got to work, someone was saying, one of my coworkers was like, you sound like you might be on the verge of sick or something. I'm like, yeah, well, I don't know. Maybe because it was moist out, the weather changing, all that stuff, camping, not enough sleep, all the usual.
I've kind of, and I slept really great too, by the way. Thursday night at Utopia.
You know why? You did not have children waking you up at 7 in the
true.
morning.
This is true. But I was right next to the Monarch stage. So somehow, wow. On Thursday night, I slept so well that I woke up on Friday, no, hold on. Was it Wednesday night? Wednesday night. I slept so well that on Thursday morning, I woke up and my eyes were still closed for the first like 5 to 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. And I actually thought I was in bed at home. That's how comfortable I was.
Wow.
It's pretty amazing.
I was comfortable. Well, actually, I don't know. We brought sleeping bag when we should have just brought a blanket. It was pretty hot in our tent, actually.
Yeah. You guys were camped with Kidsville at Utopia this year.
Yes, we've been camped with Kidsville. See, Kidsville came into existence officially in 2009. And Sally, with her daughter Vicky, and us with Jeffrey and Alec, who was just 1 year old, were like we were the start of Kidsville. So we've been with Kidsville ever since. Sally and then now Chris with her have really been like the orchestrators of Kidsville. And I'm sort of the administrative person in terms of like dealing with Utopia folk about Kidsville. But they're the ones who get there early, have a lot of the infrastructure, and really do the setting up. And because they're early, they're welcoming the new people to Kidsville, whereas, I would like to, but it doesn't work for us to be there early.
Yeah.
And this year, unfortunately, we didn't get there till Friday. We wanted to get there Thursday, but I had a work thing that I could not postpone because we've been trying since August to have this meeting.
Yeah.
So I was kind of bummed, but I wasn't going to say, nope, can't go to this meeting because we've been trying since August. And,
Yeah, I think it's funny. I spoke with multiple people. Like a lot of times when people are new to the community, I feel like it's more common for them to feel like guilty that there is a Kidsville. Like they feel weird that there's kids around. And, like they might be like in party mode and they're having a good time. And like there is this like, this kind of shame feeling that they're having. And then I think I've discovered over time as I've settled into my place in the community that when I see it, I'm just like overjoyed by it. I'm like, that's beautiful because I wish I had that when I was a kid. My parents being more honest with me and not being this division of like, kids are allowed here and they're not allowed here, that whole thing.
Well, my feeling generally is if you don't want kids to see what you're doing, don't do it in a public place.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not that hard. If you're concerned about what other people will think, then think about how you're choosing to present yourself. I don't know. I think that there have been various discussions over the years about whether there should be adult-only spaces in Utopia or not, and what to do about kids. And the fact is, we came in on Friday in daylight. It was around 5 o'clock, and my kids were numbers 75 and 76. So there were more people coming. I don't know how much of the population was here then, but Kidsville was capped at 60 this year, and I would say there were probably 25, maybe 30 kids, which means that even as of Friday afternoon, there were like more than 40 kids who weren't camped in Kidsville, who could be anywhere at all in Utopia.
Yeah.
So people just have to know that and think about who they are choosing to be and what they're choosing to do.
Yeah.
Accordingly, or not think about it if they don't want to. It's also parents' responsibilities to be able to explain things to kids if they ask. I feel like I should have an amusing anecdote at this point.
Yeah, because I'm very fascinated by this.
I have an anecdote from 2006.
Yeah, okay.
In 2006, which means that's when Jeffrey was 3.
And I'm sorry, for the listeners, your kids are how old?
Currently, they are, Jeffrey, or Free Jammin', is 12, and Alec, or Monkey Boy, is 7.
Okay.
So 9 years ago, when Jeffrey was 3, we were going down to the chicken shack because it was a great place to go get some breakfast in the morning, and there was someone who will remain nameless who was shirt cocking and there was, people might have been, and there were some other things going on too. There was some playfulness with he and someone else.
And this wasn't at Kidsville. This was somewhere else.
This was at this was in sort of a general camp area, which was almost like our center camp that year, in that there was an area where there was a lot of food that was being constantly made in fabulousness, tending towards the southern style. And then there were some couches, and there was also a little area where some other things could happen, which is where this gentleman was with someone else. And people, some people were actually a little concerned that this 3-year-old was going to see this person in this state. Okay.
Was the shirt cocker not of sober state?
No, just how he was dressed. Okay. His attire. No, okay. He was, and, he had his back to us. He was having a conversation with someone.
Minding his own business.
Yeah, doing his thing. And, but there were some people when Jeffrey and I walked in to get bacon, because how could we not have delicious bacon when there was the opportunity to? That was the whole point of going to the chicken shack, was to get bacon. But we were talking, and then at some point Jeffrey turned to me and said, "Mama, why does this man have no pants?" And I said, "Well, do you remember there was a day when all you wanted to wear was your shoes and nothing else?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, that's how this man is right now. This is what he wants to wear." It was very simple and straightforward. It wasn't a big deal. Yeah. Parents can come up with amazing choices of what to say and to make things simple. A few years ago, there was someone who had a costume which was basically a giant fuzzy brown penis and balls, which were where the feet were, who shuffled by Kidsville. And there was this animated conversation among the children as to what that was. And some people, like, there were a bunch of kids, my younger one among them, who swore that this was a frog. But I pointed out to him that frogs are green, but toads are brown. And that I think that was a toad rather than a frog because it was brown.
So you covered up that one.
Well, he wasn't convinced it was a frog. Yeah. Now, there was another kid who was a little older who was convinced that this character going by was a squirrel. And she actually turned to her father and asked him a question about that. And he said, "Well, why don't you ask this person in the costume?" And so she went over to the person in the costume, who was still sort of shuffling, and said, "I think you're a squirrel, but I'm a little confused. Where are your nuts?"
How did he answer that?
My understanding from talking with the father was he just sort of mumbled something and walked away. Yeah. Because, that was a pretty fabulous question.
So now was the father at this point comfortable with whatever answer this individual was ready to give? Like, are there any points where parents who are camping at Kidsville are like, you know what, I'm not ready to have this conversation, but there's things happening around us, and how do you get around that? Yeah,
well, there was another father that year who was very unhappy to have seen this shuffling around, but he didn't have his kids go up and ask that person a question. Yeah. I think, if you're going to bring kids somewhere, you need to be responsible and think about what kind of experience they're going to have. And
do you think the responsibility falls more on the parents?
I think it falls in lots of places. I think sometimes it might depend on what you're choosing to do or how you're choosing to do it. I think that everyone has their own boundaries, whether you're a kid or an adult. When you're an adult and you've got kids with you, you have to think about not only your boundaries, but what boundaries you want for your children. And you have to pay attention to those. Yeah. I know there are a lot of people who are going to events like this in order to explore the limits of their boundaries. I shouldn't say they're going there for that, but that's one of the things that happens for people in this context. And that's fine and good, but occasionally, you might want to think about, what your level of safety and security is in the course of that. I mean, and as a parent, I want to think about, what I'm comfortable with my kids seeing and not seeing. And most things I'm pretty comfortable with my kids seeing, as long as, because they can ask me, and I'm right there, and, they might look at me like, what's this? And I'll say, well, it's, this is someone doing leather working, or this is glass blowing, and this is how it works, or whatever it is, this is,
Nudity is generally okay with you?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What about, like, sexual acts?
Well, honestly, I've been going to DCOM since we first had one in 2003. I only missed 2008 because I had a baby a month before. And I have, in fact, never seen sexual acts at DCOM. Mm-hmm. It's just like everyone says there's porn all over the internet, and yet I've managed to miss it. And I've been on the internet since it started because I was in Santa Cruz in the 80s, and back when there were chat rooms and things were just getting started.
Sure.
I mean, I remember in the 90s going to graduate school, late 80s, going to graduate school in Pennsylvania, and telling the people in my department that I needed an email address and access to the internet, and they had no idea, really. Like, they were like, oh, really?
Yeah.
Huh. So I got to go down in the basement of the physics building in order to do that, because it wasn't common then. And yet I've still managed not to find porn. Of course, I'm not really looking for it, so that has something to do with it.
Yeah.
Do
you have any prepared answers in your head for potential situations, or do you basically cross each bridge as you arrive to it as a parent?
Yeah. Like when going to an event?
Sure.
I'm usually winging it. I think I'm pretty good at thinking on my feet and coming up with things that are reasonable.
Yeah. I feel like that's sort of the commonality about a lot of what we're discussing about how parents in our community handle situations like this versus the world at large. And of course, we're generalizing here. But generally speaking, it seems like the world at large really wants to have like set rules. Like they want to get together and everybody, let's get together and say, this is the rule, so that I don't have to think about it. Because I don't want to have to be faced with that situation and have to make a decision, because I'm scared I might make the wrong decision. And it feels like in our community, what I've been observing over time and what I've been sort of easing into over time is it is about awareness. Ultimately, you arrive at the juncture and then you decide which direction you're going to go in. And that's part of the being in the moment experience, which I guess like a lot of what we do revolves around that. We play because we're trying to be in the moment. We connect with each other on deep levels because we want to be in the moment. A lot of what we've built in these environments, even at, on Playa or at various events, they're designed so that they force you to be in the moment rather than being on autopilot, being a factory worker.
Yes. Well, and you might recall that there you were at Kidsville, and there was a little girl who commented on your attire.
Yes, I was wearing a dress. I was wearing Emerald from Hunchback of... Was it? No. Is it Emerald? Esmeralda from Hunchback of Notre Dame.
I'm so glad you know, because honestly, I don't know my Disney films hardly at all, and I'm really grateful about that. But
I didn't know it either.
But somehow you knew.
I knew it because I'd had multiple people scream it, overjoyed that I was wearing it and running up and hugging me.
Whereas this little girl was like, you can't be wearing a dress. You're a boy.
Yeah. And I was surprised by that because I in my head, I had this thing that like, no way, like a hippie kid is going to ask me that, like a child of hippies.
Right. But maybe she's not a hippie kid. Who knows? Yeah. And I said, yes, anyone can wear what they want to. I mean, there was a little boy who was in Kidsville who was wearing a skirt the day before. Or maybe, and I don't remember this girl saying anything, but I don't actually know if she was a Kidsville kid.
Yeah.
Because
she could have just been hanging out there.
There were a lot of kids hanging out because because we have the crafting tables and all kinds of things. And yeah, so it is funny. There are kids who are really stuck in those ways, whereas, I mean, a lot of this stuff has come up, and we've just sort of explained these things, you know? Yeah. I mean, and we take our kids to the Pride Festival. It's easy. Yeah. You know, a Pride Parade and the festival. Yeah, it's fun to dress up and wear what you choose to wear. It's fine to love who you love, you know? These are pretty... Kids really get it if you just tell them. And that these simple things, like, they get.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, because a lot of it really is social programming. I mean, what that little girl was saying, I don't know, how old was she, do you think?
Oh, she was probably like 7 or 8, something like that.
Yeah, she was a little bit older.
Maybe 9, yeah.
She's, so, I mean, a lot of that is, of course, like social programming. That's what the other kids in school are saying. You know, and I would have loved to have had like a conversation with her parents. I could like get to know sort of where they were at on that, because my response to her was, why not?
Yeah. Yeah, just simple.
And she seemed, I don't know what to respond. She didn't really respond to that. She kind of just gave me like a side eye and then moved on.
Yeah, well, so there might have been some things that were a little shocking for her, but yeah.
So in the organization of Kidsville, is there communication happening amongst the parents that are camping at Kidsville about what boundaries are okay and what aren't? Like, is that like a common thing that's happening? Is it organized at all? Are there parents' talks that are happening?
We have some gatherings usually in the summertime in advance. I mean, but not everyone makes it to them. And we've had some things a couple of times, like post DCOM or Utopia. But again, not everyone makes it. I mean, there's some of us who've been camping together. Obviously, like I said, you know, Sally and we've been camping together since 2009 in Kidsville. There's some other families who've been around almost as long. And so we're sort of the core folk. And I guess we've had conversations over the years, but we don't have, you know, a mandatory orientation for all comers. Yeah. Partly because we always seem to get at least 1 or 2 families who show up last minute or really need something. And yeah, we don't have, here's how it goes exactly. We do have a sense that you need to be contributing, and there are various ways you can contribute. You know, like in advance of Utopia, we have a Facebook group, and we have a spreadsheet on there in which we're asking each family to be listing various things, the ways that they're contributing, whether it's something as simple as a griddle and a waffle iron, and some pancake mix, you know, or whether it's leading a workshop or coming up with an art project that can be done by multiple people.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Or, you know, there's a potluck that we have, and what are you bringing to that? Are you bringing infrastructure? Do you have tables? Do you have shade? You know, so we don't actually talk. We tend to believe that each family has their own set of values and boundaries, and they should be. You need to be in charge of your kids. And there are things like, you know, one of our members was doing fire safety and asked if, you know, we could watch her kids while she was doing that. And of course we could. I mean, we know them well. They've stayed at our house. Our kids are all friends, and yeah.
Yeah.
So sure.
So it's about the same kind of organization and connections that are happening with any theme camp. It's not, the fact that it's Kidsville is not elevating the for lack of a better description, like political discourse, like, or statements that the camp is making. It's just like any other theme camp. It just happens to be that it's for parents.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. And that the kinds of that a number of the events that we're having, which are, sort of the way theme camps always have to have something for the public, that they tend to be geared towards children. Not entirely, but, there was a sword fighting workshop, which I think it was only kids who were doing it with foam swords. I mean, it was great. It was fun to see them. They all had a good time. But on Friday night, we also had a projector set up and we were showing Princess Bride. And, well, most of the kids were there and were rapt. People walking by would stop and watch because it's such a fabulous movie.
Yeah, it's Princess Bride.
Yeah. So
it might be one of the most universally beloved films in the history of film.
Oh, yes.
Something about that movie is just magical to people.
And we're one of the camps that gets to actually have, we have a propane fire. And so we have, at night we've got chairs around it and we've got warmth and fire. And, it wasn't so cold this year. In years past, however, people coming by would gather because it was cold and it was lovely to get you. And we just, that's something. And we roast s'mores or roast marshmallows for s'mores for the kids. Some adults could do that too, but this year, no, I don't think any adults did.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a theme camp. Yeah. It's a theme camp geared towards families, but it's a theme camp. I mean, other people can make use of our hot glue guns too,
Yeah. Yeah, which I'm sure they do. Somebody drops by every once in a while with some part of their costume falling apart.
Yes.
And they need the glue guns to work it out.
Yeah.
So producer Meg tells me that you have been serving as our ombudsman.
Yep.
Is that correct? Is that like an official position? Yep. So this is through like Burning Man HQ?
No, not through Burning Man. It's our local. It's a local HQ. So
our San Diego regional HQ decided that it would be powerful to have an ombudsman on staff.
Yeah. So if we go back in history a little bit, before we became SDCAP, we were in, which is a 501c3, and SDCAP stands for San Diego
Collaborative Arts
Program
for something.
Yes, I know. There's another SDCAP, which is a performing arts thing, which we are not.
Yes.
Anyway, before that, we were an LLC, a limited liability corporation, which was called Sundburn, Sundburn. And I was on the board of that for 4 years, 2 2-year terms. And when that ended, that was just around the time that the transition was beginning to happen. We'd been working a bit towards 501c3, but not with great activity. And so I stepped down from being on the board, and the action started happening towards becoming a 501c3. And Utopia was getting bigger. And there had been occasionally conflicts which had arisen within the structure of Utopia with various different parts of it, and like whether with volunteers and leads, or whether with people in the community and whatever. And there was this thought that it would be useful to have an ombuds, which is someone who in fact is able to listen to gather information on all aspects of an issue and report back, basically, to those in power, and also to make sure the voices are heard of those who have less power. And I had also, in my role on the board, I was always the one person who was on the board who was not a lead of anything at Utopia or DCOM or Fuego de los Muertos or whatever we want to call it, because it changed names during those years. So my role was, I only had the one hat, I was only the board member, which meant I could actually question things that other people might feel like they knew the answer to because they were already in that, they had the other hat on. So I'd already had the, looking over the budget and asking people to explain it to me because I don't know why we need to have this many fire extinguishers. Please tell me why we need this many, and why it costs this much or whatever. So I'd already had a role within the board of being the one questioning things and trying to figure out how it all worked. So the folks who were on the board after I left thought that I could have aspects of that role in a slightly different form as the ombuds. I'm also someone who, as far as I know, no one hates, which honestly is an advantage.
Yes, yes.
I mean, it's always an advantage, not just honestly, but it's not. I don't know. People don't seem to have strong negative feelings towards me, which
or at least they're not vocal about it.
Right.
So what is generally the role of an ombudsman, and then how does it differ, if any, in our community?
Okay, well, as I said, generally the role of the ombuds is to be able to gather, if there's an issue that comes up that needs further clarification, and especially if there's a sense of a grievance. It is the role of the ombuds to explore that from all the different aspects, to try to understand what's going on and to understand what led to the grievance and what can be done to provide suggestions for how it could be mitigated. And that's to be provided to the board specifically. But it involves having talked with people who are all part of all different aspects of the grievance. So now, technically, I would report to the board, but the board has no, doesn't tell me, says, here's this thing, look into it, but otherwise cannot give me direction about it.
Okay. That was going to be my question. So the board is who directs you to go investigate a particular situation?
The board can. Anyone can actually bring in something to the ombuds. It doesn't have to be the board. I've had community members bring things to me that they're saying they're not feeling. If someone is uncomfortable with someone who is in a position of power over them, and they don't feel like they have someone they can turn to, then they can bring it to me. I've also had community members come to me for someone else who's uncomfortable enough that they weren't sure what to do and didn't know me, and so that's come up.
So you almost serve like the role of a human resources department.
Well, my experience with human resources department suggests that no. And not that they're horrible, but no, it's just, I think
I'm not a huge fan either, don't get me wrong.
To my mind, those are much more bureaucratic. So, yeah, I mean, in all honesty, I mean, there certainly have been issues that have come up, which I have dealt with as ombuds. The special role that I've been given as ombuds, or specifically, I shouldn't say special role, is that I have been the person who has conducted the conversations about who will be our leads for Utopia. So that is some things where I've talked with the people who are interested in being leads, and I have gotten feedback from the community at large about these individuals, and I've reported this information back to the board, and then the board makes the final decision. And they can ask me questions and ask me to provide them with data. But so that's a specific. The board has given me the task of doing this.
So that's actually a kind of a good example. Because my next question was going to be, let's talk about a specific situation. And we don't have to, of course, talk about names specifically, but so the community did vote, quote unquote, on the STCAP board members.
Yes.
Was that a process that you were involved with?
In the vote itself? No, I haven't been part of the vote. I haven't, well, I should say there was one year when I was I still on the board? I can't even recall at this point. It might have been the year that I stopped being on the board. That I was involved in counting the votes. But no, the vote has not been something I've been in charge of. There's a whole different group of people who've done the vote, and they've worked out literally the technology of it.
Yeah, because I think I've heard some in passing, some in deep conversation, that some of the concerns about the voting process had been that many people, or many of us, are under the impression that the voting is like a direct vote, but it's actually more like a recommendation vote. And then ultimately the board still makes the decisions on who gets appointed to positions.
And for that, we would need to look at the bylaws, which I know are available because I was on the SDCAP website earlier today, actually, trying to find something else, and I saw that the bylaws are there. I mean, and I didn't look that closely, but I know that I helped write the information on the ombuds, sort of the description of the role and the duties of the ombuds. So those should be up there too, although I didn't honestly look for them.
Yeah, you said duty. So I had to make a Kidsville reference. So can you tell an example or story about like a smaller situation, maybe that you're dealing with individual community members and some sort of a grievance or a confusion that you were helping facilitate? Would you be able to speak on any of those? Yeah, it's kind of a question where you got to like dig through the files in your head to figure out which one's okay to talk about.
Right.
But perhaps something that was much more public and maybe a lot of people knew about, we just never got clarification on.
I don't know that I feel comfortable doing that at this point. I think it would be hard to talk about any of these things without
talking about the specific situations.
Yeah. I don't think that would be. Yeah.
But generally speaking, if anybody in the community has questions or concerns about any sort of situation, they can reach out to you, and you would be able to at least direct them in the right direction. It sounds like.
Yeah, and I can also, I've been in this community since the beginning of 2003. I know who was involved with who the movers and shakers were back then. I know about half of the movers and shakers now. I used to know more, but there are more people actually involved. And I know who to talk to find out other things from that I don't know. So yeah, I'm a resource.
Yeah, you'd be a good place to start.
Yeah.
How long do you plan to continue serving in this position? Or is there a term limit on it?
I don't think we actually have a term. Well, I don't know. I don't remember whether it was something that we wrote in that the board would determine on a regular basis whether I'm going to be in this or who's going to be in it. I can't recall that. I think there is something where the board needs to affirm the position. I don't remember if it's annually or every 2 years.
Do you enjoy doing it? Would you plan to stick around? Yeah,
I like being involved in the community, and I've been involved less as my kids have gotten older. I've been less involved. I mean, when I was on the board, when I was on the board of Sunburn, I recall many times bringing Alec as a baby to the meetings, but he's 7 now, and I've got some different responsibilities in terms of what my kids are up to.
See, I would think as a as a person who's never planning on having kids, I thought that as they got older, there would be less responsibility. Like now they can go change their own clothes and.
Yes, they can, but there's also are more activities that they are involved with that I need to actually pay attention to.
God.
So I mean, it was easy when he was a baby. I could just bring him everywhere with me, and it was small, and I didn't have to. It was easy. He's hungry. Well, he can feed. It's all very simple. Whereas, we have to get them. We actually have to have food for them now, rather than and make sure that they've done their homework and get to soccer on time and all those things that take time and energy. And, I'm working a full-time job. My husband's working a full-time job. It's not like we've got loads of time to devote to all these other things. We make it work, but it's not, we're not getting up on the mountain on Wednesday because the kids are in school. We're not doing the early entry and setting things up because we're working full time and they need to be in school. So, you do what you can do with the time that you have.
Yeah. Did you meet your husband, who, by the way, was the previous guest on this very show, Kingsley, Dr. Thomas Kingsley Brown?
Yep.
Did you guys meet within the community, or did you meet before?
We met in Philadelphia, where I was in grad school and he was working in a neuroscience lab. And we met because he was taking a class on religion and psychology. And he was one of the two non-undergraduates in the class. The other one was a fellow who had been my housemate my first 2 years in graduate school, who was a neuroscience grad student. And they met after class and started chatting and discovered they had a lot of things in common, and they ended up living in a large house together. And that's how I met him, because he was living with this old housemate of mine.
What was the connection? What was it that sparked it for you initially? And this is, by the way, extra interesting to me right now, because I've just now gotten to this chapter in my life where I'm like starting to feel open to that. And it's been a disaster so far. Let me tell you. The instant I find somebody interesting, it seems to be like a lot of sparks right away. And then like give it 3 days and I follow up and immediately there's like cold. The trail goes cold. I don't know what I'm doing. It seems like I'm subconsciously attracted to people that are emotionally unavailable. But so this is interesting to me. People that have been together for this long, and you guys are going on adventures together, and you're enjoying your life together, and you have so many things in common.
Yeah, we got together in 1990. We've been together 25 years. So
I came to America in 1990.
Oh my goodness.
Couldn't speak English yet.
Oh my goodness. Youngsters. So let's see. How did it start? Well, we literally met in a bar because he was with...
that works, huh?
Well, not usually. No, I wouldn't think so.
They always tell you don't meet somebody at a bar. Well,
but it's because he was hanging out with my former housemate, and they were talking about moving into a house together. And I was with some friends from my grad program who we just happened to be there at the same time. But then he moved into this house with my former housemate and like 3 other people who I knew already. And he fit the physique that I like, and he was someone who seemed interesting, and I would come over and hang out. It was only slightly out of my way on my way home. And I would drop by and we'd sit around and we'd talk, and it's funny. He told me later, I would ring on the doorbell, and when he was like a lab tech, so he was working like normal working hours, whereas my old housemate and his current housemate was a grad student and worked crazy hours in neuroscience, like working late into the night and such in the lab. So I would ring the doorbell and ask if my old housemate was there. He told me later, he said that I'd ring the doorbell and he'd be all excited to see me, and I'd say, is Jim there? And then he'd be a little bit crushed. And he'd say no, and I would walk in anyway, and we'd start talking. So it took him a little while to get that. It was just an opening line to get in the door. Yeah. Because I would just come in afterwards anyway.
Oh God, we're so bad at that. We as men, like, we're terrible at that. Like, one of the interesting tidbits that I've learned over time is I think like women generally have a stronger peripheral vision. Like you can see more around you than we can. And men have more like a direct line of sight. And independently of that, I met this artist once on the University Heights Arts Walk. University Heights Arts Association Walk, where he was making these little like cube animals. And he explained to us that the design was such that the generally in nature, predators look directly. And the prey, generally, their eyes are to the side. So like the carnivores, like, like a cheetah or a panther looks straight ahead. Whereas the ones that are hunted and are, vegetarians or whatever you call that, animals, they have the eyes on the side of their heads so that they can always watch for prey. So I think it's kind of amusing that you kind of see that a little bit with males and females as well. So it's like common with a man sitting at a bar and a woman sitting at a bar. The woman thinks that she's giving the man the signals, but it's because she has a stronger peripheral vision and the man is not catching on because he's staring directly at her and not understanding that she is kind of looking at him a little bit from the side of her eye. So I feel like that kind of thing totally goes into all of our psychology as well. Because what you're describing with the doorbell thing, I'm pretty sure I just experienced that via text message. And I didn't catch on to it and I already fucked it up.
Maybe you could text back.
Yeah, it's complicated.
Okay.
but
yeah,
see,
this was not so complicated.
Yeah.
This was
You'd go
I'd go in, we'd hang out.
Yeah. We didn't have text messages back then.
Right, we didn't. Plus, as I said, I knew almost everyone else in the house already. So it was easy to just go over and hang out. And sometimes, someone would start cooking dinner and I'd join in. And sometimes they'd start cooking dinner and I'd say it's time for me to go home. We just started talking and we kept running into each other on campus too. Because, we were both at Penn. As I said, I was a grad student there and he was a lab tech there. And so we would literally find each other on campus as we were going out to get lunch or something like that, which, after those first few months, we arranged to find each other, but we didn't just happen upon each other. Yeah. So it just seemed like it worked.
What kind of stuff did you click on? What was it? Was there things that you would talk to each other about and say, oh, wow, we are some of the only people that we know that think this way?
Well, we both were interested in neuroscience. I had done my undergraduate, I created my own major as an undergraduate, combining anthropology and psychobiology. He was working in a neuroscience lab. He'd done some neurobiology, neurochemistry before that. He was, in this class on psychology and religion. He was interested in psychology. He was interested in religion. I started talking to him about anthropology, which he really didn't know very much about. But he was interested because he had these ideas about shamanism and schizophrenia, but he didn't have them. He didn't have a whole lot of experience thinking about these things in terms of a theoretical structure, whereas I'd had that kind of experience in my anthropology classes.
Wow, so it's almost like we're getting the backstory on some of the things we discussed on his episode.
Okay. So we started talking about those things. So we met in August, September, something like that. Well, by December, he was applying. He was applying to graduate programs in anthropology, and we came out here to California together so that he could look at UCSD, Santa Cruz, and Berkeley's programs. And we stayed with my mother because she's here in San Diego.
So you already had roots here.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I had. I was living here for junior high and high school in Encinitas, and then went up to Santa Cruz for college, and went back east for grad school. So yeah.
Was a lot of your bond based around science? Sounds like. What about just even personally?
Well, you asked what we talked about. We talked about that. We had California in common. He loved having been out here for when he was in grad school in Caltech. I mean, that's why he wanted to come back here for grad school.
Burner Podcast.
All right, so if you're in the San Diego area, there's a couple of cool events coming up here. November 28th, there's the Adams Avenue Spirits Stroll. For an $18 ticket, you get to sample 12 unique cocktails created by Adams Avenue's best mixmasters and explore the businesses along Adams Avenue. So go to adamsavenuebusiness.com for more information on that one. That seems like a lot of fun. This one's, I got to make the announcement because it's a big deal. If you're in Southern California, Balboa Park's December Nights is like a big thing here. Like if you want to visit San Diego, or if you're in San Diego, or if you've never been, like it's the thing to go to. I, for one, have zero interest going to it. The Christmassy stuff just doesn't really do it for me. Growing up as a Iranian American, not celebrating Christmas, it's like, whatever, bunch of fucking lights. So I don't know. That's December 4th and 5th if you want to check that out. That's at balboapark.org if you want to get more information on it. But, a lot of people really do care about it, so I was like, fuck it, I'll announce it. The only Christmas thing that you do kind of get excited about is SantaCon. The one in San Diego, it looks like it's scheduled for December 12th. But whatever city you're in, you should just Google SantaCon followed by the name of your city, and it's a very, very high likelihood that somebody is organizing a SantaCon in your town. And it's probably one of those things you've heard about and you've always been meaning to check out. And it's basically, a fuck ton of people get dressed in Santa Claus outfits and get hammered. And for some reason, this attracts a lot of burners. I don't know why that's the case. Seems to be one of those things that a lot of cities you go to. I don't know if it's still the case in New York, because I know New York, like last year, got a lot of attention for having a lot of fights. So I don't, maybe avoid the New York one. But if you're in any other city, SantaCon's coming up. Look that up. And if you're in the LA area, definitely do go check out it. December 5th is the grand, is kind of like the opening, but you can go for the rest of the time as well. It's a gallery showing of Hunter Jackson's work. I'm going to read some of the description over here. Hunter Jackson, the undisputed original creator of costumes, characters, and concepts behind the international rock and roll phenomenon, GWAR. Yeah! Currently, he's bringing his own unique brand of lowbrow, I can't even read that word, intellectuality. I can't read that. Basically, he's bringing a lot of his stuff out there. And December 5th, he's actually going to do a signing of some of his books. And if you're familiar with GWAR, you're into that. And of course, the reason that this is of interest to us in the burner community is that he illustrated the map for San Diego's regional burn, Utopia. And that was done under the supervision of a future guest of Burner Podcasts, who goes by Swampy. Swampy's a cartographer. So I was actually talking to her earlier today about booking her on this very show. So make sure you go check that out. If you want more information on that, that is over at La Luz de Jesus. That's spelled L-A-L-U-Z, like zebra, D like Delta, E, Jesus, like Jesus.com. That's the name of the gallery that it's being shown at. Or you can just, of course, Google Hunter Jackson LA showing, and it comes up. I already tried it out. So that's happening in the LA area. Go check that out. Back to the show.
Welcome home.
This is a community that's, of course, populated by predominantly non-traditional thinkers. Like, that's what brings us together. So that's what I'm curious about. That's what intrigues me, because that's what I'm having a difficult time finding. Of course, it's like easy within our community to find people, but of course, you not only have to have that intellectual spark, but you also, there is that je ne sais quoi, there's that X factor, there's that thing that you can't explain that happens between two people. Would you say that when you were courting each other, it was something that you were looking at from an intellectual angle, or was that spark happening and it's just something you couldn't explain and you were just drawn to each other?
Goodness. Well, my best friend, when she met him, said, and I mean, I've known her since I was 15. So she's looked at him and she said, he looks just like your first boyfriend. So, I mean, there was like definite physicality that, I have a type. And he fell within that type.
Yeah.
But we could just sit and talk about pretty much anything.
Just
for
felt right.
Hours. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The puzzle pieces just fit just right.
Yeah.
And then, so how did you discover the community?
How did we discover the community? Okay, let's see. In 2000... Let's see. In 2001... in 2001, Tom went to Burning Man for the first time.
Mm.
Is that right? Yeah. And how did he go? He went because Touch.
Mm-hmm.
So we've known Touch for a really long time. I'm still good.
Mm.
We know him because back in, I don't even remember which year, we were part of a bisexual activist group here in San Diego, and Touch was part of that. We all were among the founding members of that. So we've known him since sometime in the mid-90s, I think. Early 90s, 92, 93. And I don't remember when he started going to Burning Man, but he talked about it, and he and Tom and 3 other friends all drove up together in 2001.
And you didn't go that year.
I did not go that year. I had family. Well, it didn't strike me as the thing I wanted to do right then.
Yeah. You're like, desert? What? No. Doesn't sound like fun at all.
Well, yeah, Tom is really drawn to the desert. I don't know whether you guys talked about that, but when he was at Caltech, he and his friends would go out to Joshua Tree with great regularity. He is really a desert person. I am a water person.
Yeah.
So this whole going and spending time in the desert didn't strike me as the thing to do quite. But I was encouraging of him to go explore.
I always have felt like I've been a water person until I started going to the desert. Have you seen Madagascar?
The movie?
Yeah.
Of course I've seen Madagascar,
of course,
the movie.
kids,
I have children.
So the lion, Ben Stiller's the lion character, when he goes into the jungle, he starts to get all scraggly and it feels like he's like discovering his roots and it's like it's coming out of him. I kind of started feeling that way when I started going to the desert. Like as a Middle Easterner, like I feel like the desert started coming out of me in a way that I never imagined in a million
land
years.
of your people.
Yes. I'm like, we've been doing this for a couple of thousand years before you guys came around.
See, whereas I'm Jewish, and so my land of my people could be that. But frankly, we've got friends who are from Israel, and they swear that San Diego looks a lot like Israel. So I can deal with this as the land of my people, you know?
Yeah. Well, it would actually. Random interesting side note that I learned at Mesa College. We have something called a Mediterranean climate here, which is like 3% of the Earth's surface has it. And it's the southern coast of California, the Mediterranean, of course, and the eastern coast of Australia. So it makes sense that Israel would be, especially along the waterfront, would be a lot like here.
Yeah. So, I mean, I have never actually been to Israel, so I have not done Aliyah or any of that.
Yeah.
And maybe someday, but it hasn't struck me as I'd rather go to Bali. That would be more where I'd want to go first.
Yeah.
Or go back to Europe. But be that as it may.
So he went. How many times did he go before you finally went?
Oh, well, he went in 2001. And then there were a couple of events that some of the people he went with held, which some other burners came to. And then we both went in 2002. And then we went in an RV with a 6-month-old in 2003. So, and then after that, I didn't think that, with a toddler, it didn't seem like a good choice. So then he kept going, and I didn't go. But 2003 is also the year that we started having we had our first DCOM here. So there was always local, and there was a lot of stuff happening in the local community. Yeah, really starting in 2002 and really building through 2003 and the next few years.
San Diego's just very vibrant when it comes to that, and that's a lot of what we've been exploring on this show. Like, what is it about San Diego that has really sparked that? But I want to ask real quick. So you went with your 6-month-old, is that correct? Because that's often a topic of discussion that comes up when people see children on playa, or there's discussion about children on playa. What was your understanding and or concerns and or plans for a child so young in that environment with the dust and the heat and all that?
Yep, I can actually address that pretty well.
Yeah.
First of all, we had an RV. Second of all, I stayed in camp a lot. Like, there were 2 days that in the daytime I went out of camp. One of those days, Tom stayed in camp with Jeffrey while I went exploring a bit. And then there was another day when there was a specific thing a specific talk I wanted to go to. And I, took him in the stroller, which closes up, becomes this enclosed environment, pretty much, and strolled him across to where that event was happening, that lecture, which was in an enclosed area. And we were there for that lecture. And when the lecture was over, there was a dust storm. So we stayed in that enclosed environment until the dust storm was over. And then I popped him back in the stroller and closed it all up. And we went back to camp. Our camp was very well organized. We always had amazing number. We had an exceptional kitchen with. We had Dews, which gave us many snacks of various kinds. I wasn't concerned about food. We always had 10 gallons of ice cold water because there was literally a chunk of ice that got put in it every day, and it was a 10-gallon thing. So I was hydrated. In fact, my baby was probably the best hydrated person on the playa. Sometimes definitely better hydrated than me. But I was breastfeeding, so he was always hydrated well.
And that dust is so fine.
That was actually a year when I think that time we were out might have been the only time there was really a dust storm. Also, the winds die down at night. It's becomes calm and cool, really calm and clear at night. And that's when we would go out as a family. Yeah. We would be pushing the playa on the deep playa. Pushing the stroller on the deep playa. And I remember someone biking up to us and saying, "You don't have a kid in there. You must be carrying bringing beer or something." We're like, "No, this is our child." Yeah. People were sort of really shocked that we would be there with a baby. Yeah. But we were careful about it. He did watch the man burn. He was sitting up in his stroller and sort of mouth agape, eyes agog, watching the fire. He was really excited. So, I also, on Thursday, I think it was, might have been Friday, I was at the temple with him as it was getting to be sunset. And I was breastfeeding him, and someone came and took a picture and said it was the most beautiful thing they'd seen all week. And I wish I had thought to actually get that person's contact information, get a copy of that picture. That was the year that the temple was sort of this, it was black and white papered over, 2003. So, I was very conscious of the weather. I was conscious of where to be safe. As I said, I didn't leave camp a whole lot in the daytime because it was too hot, too bright, too potentially windy. And
did you see other parents with children the same age that you felt were not being as safe? Were there things that you would recommend against as a parent who's done it?
Well, I would say I stopped when he got to be able to be mobile. I didn't think it was safe to be a little kid toddling around close to the dust. The stroller took him up away from it.
That's funny because a lot of people argue the opposite. And when I say a lot of people, by the way, it's a lot of times people that don't even have kids. I'm just talking about passing conversations. But a lot of times people seem to be very focused on, and mind you, I don't know how a kid works. I'm totally illiterate when it comes to that. But a lot of times it seems like the concern is just about the breathing in of the dust, which is not exclusive to when there's a dust storm.
Right. Right. But I think if you're actually toddling around in it, you're more likely to end up with it in your mouth and in your system. If you're up higher in a stroller, I think it's a little less likely to happen. I mean, that was actually, the playa was pretty crisp that year, so it wasn't really dusty.
But isn't their argument more about that their lungs are more developed as they get older? Like, is a 6 months old lung more delicate than a 4-year-old's? Again, I have no idea. I
couldn't tell you, honestly. Yeah. Yes, I do think that cumulatively it may not be the best thing. You know, he did go back when he was 8 with his father. That's the other time we've been there, or that he's been there.
Did he have fun?
He did. They rode bikes around. They were camped not in Kidsville, but near Kidsville. And they spent a lot of time at Kidsville. And also catching art cars and going around.
How does Kidsville operate differently on Playa versus at like Utopia at DCOM?
Well, I've never been to the Kidsville on Playa. I was on their listserv for a while years ago. So I couldn't really tell you. I can tell you it is larger. And my understanding from someone who has camped there is that it works less as a theme camp per se. I don't know. Actually, I shouldn't even go anywhere in there because I don't really know enough to say anything comprehensive or coherent fully. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, one of the things I actually asked Nicole, who is one of our regionals.
Yeah, we've had her on the show.
Okay. Just the other day was whether for any of the other regional gatherings, is there a Kidsville, and does she know if there is and who to contact? Because it would be interesting to talk with some of the other people from regionals who have something like a Kidsville, and just talk about what their experience is of best practices, for example.
Yeah.
You know, just so we can share what we know and learn from them.
And expand the knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of what the thought behind this show was that people could listen to these things and get an idea. Because the reason I was asking, for example, about Kidsville on Playa was because we might have a listener who hasn't actually made it out yet. And they have kids, and maybe the idea of reaching out to Kidsville had never quite even dawned on them.
Right, and I will say, I mean, I was on the listserv with the thought that we might do that, but then we have not gone back as a family.
Because you're not a fan of the desert?
Well, because we had another kid, and so then we had another one who was little and getting to the point where, you know, he's maybe getting tall enough now, but I'm still not sure. And there's also issues of children and personalities, and you know they have the playa. I mean, going to the La Jolla Indian Reservation campground it's a much safer place overall. It's a lot closer to anything you might need, and the really dangerous things there for a kid, I mean, other than falling in the creek, is poison oak, generally, whereas, you know, and fire ants, and yellow jackets. This year, many people got stung, at least in our camp, by yellow jackets. But if something goes bad on the playa, it could go bad quickly. And it's not something I'm interested in having to deal with or I'm not interested in going with my kids until I know for sure that they will listen to our warnings and heed them automatically. And not be,
Not question it.
Yeah, just...
I don't know. I don't know if you'll win on that one, because questioning things is a symptom of intelligence.
It is, but
They're only
but defying things is not a symptom of intelligence.
Defying?
Yeah, like not listening. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say defying.
Yeah.
I need to know that they're paying attention and that they really get it.
Mm-hmm. That they understand the dangerous things. Yeah.
Yeah, and a 7-year-old, this particular 7-year-old isn't quite there. Our older son at 8 was there, but our 7-year-old right now is not. Yeah. Everyone has their own personality, and children are different from one another, even if they're siblings.
Absolutely. Yeah. So
we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah, of course, as I said earlier, we've spent a lot of time discussing your relationship because I'm personally curious about that. So one of the things that intrigues me, for example, is that like dinner time conversation, like you can talk about neuroscience and and such. So at the time that you guys were studying these things in college, I want to say that the conversation about neuroscience, and this is strictly anecdotal, sort of broke to the mainstream more recently. I say more recently, I want to say like in the past decade.
You mean the whole decade of the brain?
Yeah.
Well, sure. But it doesn't mean people haven't been doing and thinking about neuroscience for years and years. I mean, when my father started doing research, which was in the 50s, he was an experimental psychologist.
What does that mean?
Well, that's what, he was a rat runner. He did, he looked at maze learning in rats. That was like his first area. That I think was what his dissertation was on. There's a copy of it up at UC Berkeley campus somewhere. But by the time he retired in 2000, he was a developmental psychobiologist. So he was doing the exact same thing all along. Developmental psychobiologist. So originally he was, it's just the labels have changed. So he was looking at brain and behavior, how it changes during development and over time. Really, like because he was, as I said, he was a rat runner. Really, he was looking from birth through what you can do during the period from birth to weaning with rats, and how these simple things that you can do affect their behavior as adult rats. So development is, as you grow in age. Psychobiology is what experimental psychology has become. If you're thinking about both wetware, brain and the nervous system, as well as what we consider psychology, like theories of mind. At least in humans. This is my father.
This is your father. Was your mother scientist as well, or?
My mother, well, she does have a PhD in psychology of death and dying, but that came later. That was like when I was in high school. She ran social service agencies when I was younger.
Let me tell you something, Gaia.
Yes, dear.
It is such a massive ego boost for me that I can actually even have a conversation with you and Kingsley, and be able to keep up and not look like an idiot every 2 seconds, because it just seems like you guys are just like a family tree of intellectual giants. I mean, like, you're working on things that most people don't even give a second thought to. Like, what was dinner conversation like, and how did that affect sort of where your career went as you progressed? Well,
I will say, I am the only lefty in my family. When I was about 14, I think. I'm not exactly sure when. My dad sent me this New York Times Magazine section, which had this big article about...
Like in an envelope?
Yes.
In the mail.
In the envelope, in the mail. Well, because he was living in Connecticut and I was living in California.
My point is he didn't put it on your Facebook wall.
Right, right. I got to, yes, he didn't send me a link. But the cover article in that New York Times Magazine section was about these people who were severe epileptics, who had split brain surgery, and the research that has been done with them since then. So the surgery had been done by Joe Bogan, and some of the research had been done by, I think, Roger Speary, I think his name was, and then a lot more work has been done by Gazzaniga with these people looking at. So these are people who literally have had the corpus callosum, which is the nerve bundle which connects your left and right hemisphere with one another. They've had that severed on purpose because they had severe epileptic seizures. And what happens with an epileptic seizure is it starts in one area of the brain, and then it can spread throughout that entire hemisphere, and then it crosses the callosum and spreads throughout the other hemisphere.
Okay.
So by severing the callosum, you localize the seizure only to one side. So this is a very unusual population, and they only got
they had a procedure done to
right. They only after they tried everything else did they actually have this medical procedure done, which severed the corpus callosum. And having done that, Gazzaniga has done decades worth of experiments with things with say splitting their visual field and finding out what is happening with the left side of the brain and what's happening with the right side of the brain, with all kinds of ingenious ways of looking at that. So that whole drawings from the right side of the brain, that book. Honestly,
that general urban myth that exists about the right and the left. And
right, which it just drives me a little nuts because the fact is there are very, very few people whose brains are not connected. Now, there are some people who are born with their corpus callosum not intact, but very few. And so the point is, I started thinking about these things back then.
Yeah. When you were 14 at the dinner table.
Yeah.
With your dad.
Well, when I would see him at times. But yes. Yes, so I started talking with him about these things. And
I feel like part of the reason that this general, like this urban myth has existed, like the whole right and left side of the brain, independent thing, like is because, of course, the general population has like this very surface level understanding based on something that was forwarded to them in an email. Because
they haven't sat at the table and talked about it.
Yeah.
Right. And whereas I would sit and talk with my mother, when I was in high school, my mother ran a home nurses registry for the terminally ill and dying out of our house. So we got to deal with that. So that was a whole different thing to be dealing with. I've actually, now that I'm 50, I probably haven't dealt with more death than most people my age. But for a long time, I had dealt with more death than most people my age, maybe even still. Because we ran a home nurses registry for the dying. Anyway, that's sort of childhood stuff.
Yeah.
So yes, we can talk about these things. We can also talk about music and trumpet and like what there is to do in Wales, because that's what the project is that my son is working on right now. How many castles?
Yeah. Did you know from childhood that you were following the sciences?
I went to college thinking I was going to do psychology, and I adapted it to this other stuff. Anthropology and psychobiology combined. Like research psychology or like therapy? I was thinking research. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I don't know. But then I went to graduate school in history of science. So I actually have a master's in history and sociology of science, medicine, and technology. So where did that eventually take you after college? Well, okay. So college, then straight to grad school. I did my master's thesis on the thematic apperception test. I started working on a dissertation on the treatment of epilepsy in America, which came from my thinking about that actually started when I was 14 in that article about the split brain stuff, but I didn't get as recent as the split brain stuff. And then Tom and I got together. He got into grad school here at UCSD. I was working on my dissertation and I came out here with him. And I found a job, which was in epidemiology, doing statistical analysis at UCSD. And I've been doing that ever since. I've been working in cardiovascular epidemiology for 20 some odd years.
Yeah.
Mostly looking at problems with arteries in the peripheral system, legs predominantly, but also the aorta. And now we're actually looking at calcium in the heart, so we're getting to more central, at least from the cardiovascular system. I've also done work on problems with veins in the legs, and looked at role of statins and cognitive issues. And there's another project I'm working on, which is looking at suicidality in the Army. I mean, so I've been working on interesting problems, and what matters to me there is that we're doing the work we're doing can be applied. It's the base. I'm not as excited by the basic sciences as I used to be.
Yeah.
I like to see that there's some place that it can go, that it can actually help someone in a more immediate way.
Yeah. Which segment of the population catches your interest in that? Is it the military or just the...
Well, there's all different ones. I mean, really, what we've been doing with coronary calcium scoring, we had a paper in JAMA, was it last January? Which is it? We have, like, a lot of people who are middle-aged have had coronary calcium scoring. They know what their CAC score is, but the way that it has been scored, we think we're working on a better way of scoring it, basically, which is actually going to be more useful in terms of determining whether you're likely to have a heart attack or have heart problems. So that's something, I mean, that's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
You know, we just had, the reason I wasn't at DCOM on Thursday was because that was the meeting, was to get together with our collaborators up in LA to talk with them about where we are in this part of the project and what's going on next with it.
Yeah.
You know, we're in year 3 of this 5-year study.
Wow. So does it seem like the kids are interested in this stuff, or is it just like casual conversation around the dinner table?
You mean interested in all of the science stuff, or interested in the Burning Man stuff, or interested in fire spinning?
The Burning Man stuff, I would imagine they would be right, just because people are playing, But I mean, the sciences.
Oh, yeah. I mean, last year, when Jeffrey was in 6th grade, they had to do a project where they were imagining they were in their first year of college, and they had to do a budget and figure out how they were going to manage to pay for college and live their lives and what's their major going to be. And he was going to be doing nanoengineering. Alec wants to do engineering. I mean, neither Tom nor I are engineers, although Tom's father was an engineer and my grandfather was an engineer. But they imagine making things and figuring out, and they both are really like math.
Yeah.
Which we really like math. I mean, we can sit around and talk weird math things.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of sounds like they're attracted to sort of like the two sides of you guys, because you have your scientist side, and then you have your like, let's create side, the Burning Man side. And I feel like sort of the children of these two things would be engineering or art, some kind of art that involves engineering.
Oh, and yeah, any kind of thing like that. Although the soul path didn't involve a whole lot of engineering, but it was fun.
How much of that do you believe, based on your own experiences growing up and the path that you followed and what you're watching your children go through, how much is nature versus nurture?
Oh my God. That's an artificial distinction. Okay, so the first question that you asked, or maybe one of the early questions you ask in that thing we're supposed to fill out, and maybe we'll get to it, and maybe we won't, only if we need to. I know.
Background,
But one of the things you ask is, what is your favorite principle? Oh, and I should tell you that Tom's favorite principle was not what I told you the other day on Saturday, but he said that what he first wrote down was the Heisenberg uncertainty principle.
Yeah.
Whereas what I wrote down first was Gödel's incompleteness theorem, which I don't know.
I don't know what that is.
You don't know that.
No.
You didn't read Gödel, Escher, Bach when you were in college? This was like required reading for anyone who was trained. Well,
I did, but then I had to get caught up on my X-Men comics, and then like that kind of superseded.
Okay, so Gödel's incompleteness theorem is that you can never fully, to paraphrase, is that you can never fully understand a system of which you are a part. So you are part of nature and nurture. You cannot separate them out, make these distinctions. It's like right brain and left brain. They are integrated wholes.
Yeah. Okay.
And
is there such thing as free will?
Wait. I'm going with this. I'm going to go on my own thing there.
I think they're connected.
But I have more to say. Because one of the things that I talked with someone about on Saturday, and also one of the things that connected Tom and I was there's this brilliant theorist, anthropological theorist, and just sort of social theorist, Gregory Bateson, who has a book which is Mind and Nature, a Necessary Unity. That these things are not separate, they're not distinct. And I was talking with someone who I met on Saturday who in fact is a biology geek who needs to know these things because she's also interested in ecological stuff, and he has another book which is Steps to an Ecology of Mind. So free will, again,
She's shaking her head, listeners, by the way, because you can't see it. But
right, I'm just thinking this is a silly question.
Sure.
Is there free will? Everything is part of a system.
Yeah.
I don't know. One of my professors in grad school talked about technologies and talked about issues of tightly coupled systems. And tightly coupled systems can be problematic because if one little thing fails, then the whole thing can fail with a tightly coupled system. If you have a more loosely coupled system, like biology, our bodies are loosely coupled systems. So you'd think they're really tightly coupled, but in fact, you can function with 20% of one kidney functioning. You will still be alive. That's a lot of overlapping function there. So that, if you consider that you have that most people have two kidneys that are functioning at 100%, the fact that you can still be alive with only 20% of one is a lot of redundancy.
Yeah.
We're even beginning to realize in the last 10 to 20 years that neurons, which we used to think could never regrow, that in fact, and we used to think that we stopped developing in terms of our brains once we hit about 18 or so. We've realized that people's brains are still developing and changing into their 20s, and we've just been recently realizing how that it is possible for neurons to regrow, there's some amazing work being done on that. Which could help paraplegics, quadriplegics at some point in the future. So where was I going with all this? You were asking about free will. I just don't think that we can... Right, and I was going into tightly coupled and loosely coupled systems. I think that it depends on what kind of system you think you're in.
I must confess to you, I am amused because I knew that question would be frustrating for you. So I guess because a lot of that just trace back to, again, like what is our definition of these words? I mean, these are noises we're making with our mouths to communicate an abstract subject, because a lot of it does eventually trace back to, like, was there ever discussions of religion and spirituality around your dinner table when you were 14 with your parents, and now with your children?
Well, sure. I mean, I am Jewish. We did celebrate the holidays. We didn't go to temple with great regularity outside of the holidays. I mean, I did. If we'd stayed in Connecticut another year, I would have been bat mitzvah. But we left when I was 12, and San Diego in the 1970s had a very small Jewish community, and we were not thrilled with it. So, because, I mean, we had been in Connecticut where the only Jewish community was through the Hillel, which was, on campus. And this was the 70s, which, it was a very different experience than like a regular temple, because, like my Hebrew school teachers are, like, half of them were like undergraduates at the college, UConn. And it was pretty liberal. And most temples are not quite so. Nowadays, there's a lot more choices, a lot more variety within Judaism. Reconstruction, renewal, all came into existence really around since that time. So yeah, but the kind of Judaism that I think of is also based in it's based in recognizing the seasons and the role that, like, the actual physical earth plays in why we do what we do. Because there really is a lot. I mean, why is Passover in the spring? What is it about? It's about spring and renewal and growth. And yes, it's also about going from slavery to freedom, and that's really important. But, there's a reason why we have an egg and why we have green things that we eat at that time. So we've got to remember that we are connected to the earth too. So yes, there was that kind of stuff around the dinner table. And there's some of that stuff around our dinner table, I mean, not as explicitly, because my kids don't go to Hebrew school, don't go to Sunday school, so they don't have it on a weekly basis to be reminding them of what these things are. But, they like it when we eat latkes, and when I come and explain Hanukkah in their class, and all the kids get to learn how to play dreidel.
Yeah. Have they asked about God?
No, I don't think so.
That's interesting. So. The conversation about shirt cockers has been had, but not God.
Well, one's more immediate than the other.
Yeah, it's right in your face.
As it were. Although, actually, it was more like 10 feet away.
Yeah.
With couches in between.
Yeah.
But, nonetheless, God is pretty abstract, I mean, we have some books that have versions of God in them. But, yeah. We were once at a party. We were actually at I think it was at a winter solstice party at some friend's house. And there was a picture of Jesus somewhere in the house. And I don't remember. It must have been Jeffrey, because I don't think Alec was born yet. Looked at it and asked me if that was a picture of Santa Claus. We told the people whose house it was. They were very amused. Yeah. We all were, actually. Yeah. I mean, it's all stories. It's different stories that we tell ourselves and tell each other.
Yeah.
I mean, people need stories. They need narratives. But might not need the same stories that we've had for 2,000 years.
Yeah. Well, the telephone game happens.
Yes. Yes, that does too.
And then you have, people throwing out silly words like free will.
Yes.
Understanding the system. But it's interesting to me because, there's that saying about sort of like, are you looking at the trees or are you looking at the forest?
Mm-hmm.
And it seems that you're looking at the ecosystem. And I imagine that's where that question of free will becomes very complicated and silly.
Yes. Yes, we're certainly not Calvinists who would say that there is no free will, everything is predestined.
I don't know about predestined.
Well, that's what Calvinists thought. Really.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not really my thing. Predestination.
Yeah.
Kismet. Someone asked me whether I believed in Kismet once. And I said, what do you mean? They said, they meant love at first sight, I think is what they said. And I said, no, I don't. I think, I think it takes work and effort, and it's not like it just happens magically. I don't think of predestination as the way of things.
Yeah. Yeah. Oof. A lot to think about on a random Wednesday night.
Nah.
Yeah. No, it's it's connected to some extent. Some of the things that we're talking about, that we kind of, because there's episodes where we just talk about individual lives, and then there's episodes where we're talking about, more abstract concepts such as this. Mm-hmm. And it's almost as if like a lot of times the conversation starts to go in a direction where like my physical brain doesn't have, like, I can understand what's being discussed, but I have difficulty like re-articulating it back. So that's why like this is really interesting to me, and with you guys and the family that you're raising and the career path that you have been on, and our intellectual giants that walk this earth. And it's interesting that conversation is a conversation that is being had in our community amongst multiple different levels of people that are interested in different things, people that have different backgrounds and different strengths. Some are artists, some are engineers, some are scientists, some are dancers, and there's all these things. And I think that's where, to me, it all comes full circle. Like what we were talking about in the beginning of this conversation about Kidsville, and then getting into where we ended up at.
Well, okay, there are a couple things. One is over the weekend, what day was it? It was really, we got there Friday. So it was really Saturday morning. I was putting together, or we were putting together the Soul Path. And
the Soul Path is for the listeners who haven't seen it, it's a art project. Would you describe it as?
Yeah, it's definitely an art project. It is a barefoot path, a barefoot walking path with different natural textures in each of the segments. And we created it for Figment this summer, and then we brought a version of it to Utopia just this past weekend. I got the idea from the fact that there are these barefoot paths in parks in Europe, and I thought, wouldn't it be fun to have something like that here that we could create and bring to an event? Because we don't have something that is specifically like that I know of in any of our local parks, where there are very distinct textures to be feeling with you barefoot. Part of what I thought about with this was that my kids don't spend a whole lot of time barefoot, and I used to spend a lot more time barefoot than I do, and it would be nice to just sort of get to have those different experiences in a sort of concentrated way. I mean, this is a pretty small path. So for this past weekend, what my collaborators and I, who'd been working on it before, decided was that we were going to bring the infrastructure for it, but not bring the things that would go in each of the segments. Whereas for Figment, we brought each of the things went into the 11 segments except for the grass that was in the park. That was one of the segments. So this one we decided we were going to gather materials there at the campground, because then we wouldn't have to haul them in and haul them out. And then the whole leave no trace thing was not a problem because they were all things from the campground.
Yeah.
So, it was some of my collaborators who'd gotten there earlier had actually set up the infrastructure for it by Friday when I got there, and then Saturday morning, because by the time my tent was set up, it was dark. I was looking around thinking, okay, we need to fill this. What are we going to fill it with? And I asked a 9-year-old, I think he's 9, if he wanted to help me do this. And he was all excited and enthusiastic. And I gave him the responsibility of finding some sand. And he went and thought he found some and asked his mom to help him. And they got some. And they were like taking care of that part. And then there were some logs that Guy and then someone else were working on rolling over there. Actually, first the kid was helping me, and we tried putting the logs in different configurations, and one way wasn't stable, and upright wasn't stable, so then we put them on their side one way, and that wasn't so good, so then we put them on the side the other way. That seemed pretty good, but one of them was really rocking a lot, and another one of the parents came by, and we were talking about this, and he just went and got a wedge-shaped rock and put it in there, and it was like, boom, it was all taken care of. There it was. Everything was stable for that section. And then some other kids wanted to help, and I sent them to gather leaves, and I showed them which kind of leaves to get, and and someone else went off to get waters because we had a section which was going to have water, and it was just like everyone was working on it and coming up with their own method of how they were going to do it and what was going to go there and how it was going to work, and be, other people were going off and getting rocks from the stream so that we had rocks to walk on. And I had this realization that, I was surrounded by all these brilliant people who were each, I said, here's the thing that needs to go there. And they went and they did it. They figured it out. They took care of it. They just took charge. And, they were 6 and 7 and 9 and 12 and 30 and 40 and 50 and all different ages. And all of them were able to go, okay, I need to do this, and just do it. And as the weekend wore on, obviously this was a microcosm there, but as the weekend wore on and I wandered around and looked at what was going on there at Utopia, it was clear to me that I've surrounded myself with brilliant people. And today, coming home from work, talking with Tom, he was talking about, just thinking about who we've had in our lives over the 25 years we've been together and our lives before that. And the fact that we both work at the university. We have chosen quite deliberately to surround ourselves with people who are brilliant in a variety of ways, not just intellectually, academically, but all kinds of ways. That's really important, is to be with vibrant people who we can see there's a spark there.
Yeah.
And that means, this is how we live. I see this at my kids' school. The teachers are all brilliant and dedicated, and it's a co-op school, which means that parents are putting in a bunch of time too, and they're dedicated and just imaginative and coming up with ways of making things work. I don't know if you've had Brandy on here, for example. She's a parent at the school. Just we've chosen deliberately to be in communities of thoughtful, caring people.
Yeah, plugged into the system.
Yeah, deliberately.
Yeah.
It's none of it is happenstance.
Yeah, and yet somehow it's a system.
Yeah, but we choose to live where we do. We chose the We choose where we're working. We choose where our kids are going to school. We choose who we spend our time with.
Yeah. I think that kind of sums it all up. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Certainly. It's been fun.
It has. Thank you.
All right, you can tweet me directly at Mr. Arash, and when discussing the show, please do use the hashtag Burner Podcast. You can also catch me on Crappy Awesome Podcast, a weekly interview show and staple in the independent hip-hop community for about 4 years and 200 plus episodes. Find that over at platformcollection.com. Shows are up on Libsyn and SoundCloud first. Make sure to go check it out over at Libsyn is pretty much the first place that it goes up. It's the broadcasting platform. SoundCloud is when you can download it and save it for your own archives. And you can also get it on iTunes and Stitcher and TuneIn.com. Please do leave us some reviews on iTunes. It does help us get ranked and searched more. Our intermission music is by Duckman. Check out his music at duckmansd.bandcamp.com. And if you're a musician in the community, tweet your music over to Navjeet. He is on Twitter at I am Navjeet. The Burner Podcast theme song is America's Horse with No Name remix, produced by Joman. Check out his stuff over at soundcloud.com/DJ Joman. This episode is produced by Meg King. If you have any questions or comments or suggestions for future guests, shoot them over to her at Meg King. She is on Twitter at @MegKing. Our online editor is Tanasi. He writes and curates the blog. You can reach him by shooting a message over to him from burnerpodcast.com. Hope you'll join us next time. We do release new episodes on the first and third Wednesdays of the month. So until next time, love and light and all that other crap. Good night.